It started with something so small, so ordinary it should have meant nothing. A letter. Just a simple, cream-colored envelope with no return address, no markings, no stamp. It was slipped through our front door on a quiet Tuesday afternoon while we were both in the living room, watching TV, sharing snacks, lost in the casual rhythm of a normal life. But here's the thing, my wife was sitting right next to me when I picked it up. She hadn't moved. She hadn't left the room. And yet, the letter was from her. Not just from her, but to me, addressed in her handwriting, sealed with her lipstick, and containing details only she could have known. But when I asked her about it, her face went pale, like the blood just drained out of her. And then she said, quietly, "I didn't write it." That was the moment everything I believed about my marriage, my home, my life, cracked open. And I want you to stay with me, because by the end of this story, you're going to understand why this wasn't just a prank, or a mistake, or some twisted coincidence. This was the beginning of something I never imagined possible. You're not just going to hear what happened, you're going to feel it. And trust me, if you've ever questioned the reality around you, if you've ever felt like something was off but couldn't put your finger on it, this story is going to crawl under your skin and stay there. You and I both know YouTube is full of crazy titles, paranormal tales, haunted houses, glitch in the matrix stories. But this isn't just one of those. This is different. And I'm not just telling you this for views or clicks. I'm telling you because something is really happening here, and I need someone else, someone like you, to witness it. Not just hear it, not just believe it, but feel it through me. I don't need you to trust me yet, just follow me. Give me a few minutes to walk you into the heart of this thing, and I promise, you'll understand why I can't forget what happened, why I can't sleep at night, and why, most terrifying of all, I'm not even sure my wife is who she says she is anymore. We all think we know the people closest to us, right? Our partners, our friends, our families. We think, nah, not them. They'd never lie to me. They'd never hide something from me. But what if they didn't know what they were hiding? What if someone or something was slipping through the cracks of your reality and using them like puppets? That's what I started to believe. But before we go that deep, let's rewind. Because this isn't the kind of story that smacks you in the face all at once. No, it creeps in. Slowly. Quietly. It begins with a strange moment you can't quite explain, and by the time you realize what's happening, you're already in too deep to climb back out. You'll see exactly what I mean soon. But just remember one thing. That envelope, that letter, it didn't just come from nowhere. Someone, something, wanted me to find it. And it wanted my wife to be there when I did. Now, if you're still watching, that tells me something about you. It tells me you're the kind of person who doesn't look away when things get weird. You want answers. You want the truth, no matter how uncomfortable or unbelievable it might be. And that's good, because that's exactly what you're going to get. This story unfolds like a puzzle. Every piece matters. Every small detail will come back around. You miss one, and it won't hit the same. So stick with me all the way through. This isn't fiction. This isn't fantasy. This is what really happened to me. And if you've ever experienced something you couldn't explain, like déjà vu that felt too real, or dreams that felt like memories, then you might find pieces of yourself in what I'm about to share. Let me tell you a little about my wife, because you need to understand what made that letter so terrifying. Her name's Rachel. We've been married for 7 years. She's smart, logical, doesn't believe in ghosts or spirits or any kind of paranormal nonsense. She's the kind of person who double-checks the locks, always knows where her keys are, keeps a planner, pays bills early, remembers birthdays. She's the rock. The one I leaned on when my dad passed, the one who talked me out of quitting my job when I hit burnout, the one who held me through 2 miscarriages and never once made it about her. Rachel's real. She's grounded. If there's one person in the world who couldn't possibly be involved in something creepy or unnatural, it's her. So when she said, "I didn't write this letter," I believed her. But that belief came with a cost. Because if she didn't write it, then who the hell did? The letter itself wasn't long. Maybe 4 sentences. But every word carved into my brain like it was written in stone. It started with, "Don't trust me." That was the first line. No greeting, no explanation, just those 3 chilling words in her handwriting. And then it got worse. The letter mentioned a place we'd never told anyone about, a cabin in the woods we rented once, for years ago, for our anniversary. A place where something strange happened, something we never talked about again. It mentioned a song Rachel hums in her sleep when she's stressed, something I barely noticed. And then the last line, it said, "I'm not the one you think I am." That's when I stopped reading out loud, because Rachel's hands started shaking. Her eyes filled with something I can only describe as recognition, like somewhere, deep down, part of her knew. And when she looked up at me and whispered, "It's happening again," I felt my stomach drop, because she had never said anything like that before. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Maybe not to me, maybe not even to her. But something ancient, something hidden, was moving in the shadows of our lives, and it had just stepped into the light. I know you're wondering what happened at that cabin. What's Rachel hiding? Who wrote the letter? I promise, all of that is coming. But the truth isn't clean. It doesn't arrive neatly packaged. It unravels, like a thread you pull from a sweater. And once you start pulling, you can't stop. So, if you're someone who loves a good mystery story, if you binge watch those unexplained phenomena videos late at night, if you've ever searched YouTube for true creepy stories, paranormal events caught on camera, or real glitch in the matrix experiences, then buckle up. Because this story hits every single one of those nerves, and it doesn't let go. From this point forward, things get darker. Not in a horror movie jump scare kind of way, but in a slow-burning am I losing my mind kind of way. You're going to hear things that sound impossible. You're going to question whether I'm making this up. And honestly, I hope you do. Because if this happened to you, you wouldn't want to believe it either. But once I show you what happened next, the second letter, the whispers on the baby monitor, the night I woke up and Rachel wasn't in bed but was standing outside in the rain, staring up at something I couldn't see, you'll start to understand. This isn't just about a letter. This is about a crack in the fabric of who we are. A tear in the veil between what we know and what we think we know. And here's the kicker. Once that tear opens, it doesn't close. It spreads. It spreads into your dreams, into your memories, into the spaces in between conversations you thought were normal. It changes everything. But to truly understand it, we have to go back. Way back. Before the letter. Before the cabin. Before Rachel and I even met. Because this isn't just our story. It might be your story too, and you just haven't found your letter yet. It's strange how, in hindsight, the signs were always there. The little glitches in daily life that felt too subtle to question at the time, but now seem like glaring warnings we somehow ignored. I didn't notice it immediately, of course. I was too caught up in the routines of work, bills, and the quiet grind of day-to-day living. But looking back, I can trace the shift to about 3 months before the letter arrived. That's when Rachel started changing in ways that didn't make sense. At first, it was small stuff. She'd call me from the grocery store and ask if I wanted almond milk, even though I'm lactose intolerant and we've never bought dairy milk in the 7 years we've lived together. Then there were the TV shows. We've always been into true crime, binge-watching documentaries late into the night, but she started getting uncomfortable with them. Said they were too dark. That was odd, because she was the one who introduced me to Mindhunter and got me hooked on serial killer podcasts in the first place. When I asked her about it, she just shrugged and said maybe she was changing. Everyone does, right? But I remember feeling like I was talking to someone who had read about my wife in a file, rather than someone who actually lived those experiences with me. Things escalated quietly. Rachel became forgetful, missing her dentist appointment, misplacing her car keys, calling her sister, Maggie, when her name's Lisa. But what got to me was how she reacted when I pointed it out. She'd laugh it off, but not in the easy, familiar way. It was stiff, almost rehearsed, like she knew she had to respond a certain way, but didn't quite understand why. And there was one moment, one that still rattles me, when she came out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, and asked me where we kept the guest sheets. We don't have guest sheets. We don't even have a guest room. When I reminded her of that, she blinked, confused, then nodded slowly and said, "Right. Sorry." Must be thinking of something else. That pause? That's something else? It wasn't the kind of slip you can wave away. I could see it in her eyes, like her mind had drifted somewhere unfamiliar, somewhere not meant for me. Around that same time, my job situation was spiraling. I work in IT for a private firm in the city, mostly handling network security and incident response. Nothing glamorous. But 3 months ago, we got hit with a cyber attack that wiped out half of our archive drives. No one took credit for it, and the logs were clean, too clean. Like someone had scrubbed them intentionally, leaving no trace. That shouldn't be possible. Not unless someone had inside access or was using tech we didn't even understand yet. We launched an internal investigation, but everything dead-ended. Our manager hinted we should let it go. It's above your pay grade, he told me one night over beers, not meeting my eyes. I shrugged it off at the time, assuming it was a corporate cover-up, but I didn't think it had anything to do with me. Not personally. Now, I'm not so sure. Because a few weeks later, I started getting strange messages, emails from unlisted domains, just strings of numbers and letters that looked like encrypted keys. I ignored them,
Mark them as spam.
until one showed up with the subject line, "You're not safe, and neither is she." That was the moment the paranoia began to sink in, not just for me, but for both of us. I didn't tell Rachel about the messages, but I noticed she was starting to act on edge too. She kept checking the locks before bed, waking up in the middle of the night to peer out the window, whispering in her sleep. One night, I heard her say a name I didn't recognize, Alexei. She mumbled it like a prayer, over and over. When I asked her about it the next morning, she looked startled. Said she didn't know anyone by that name. Said I must have dreamed it. But the look in her eyes told a different story. It wasn't just forgetfulness. It was fear. Deep, hollow fear. I started digging. I don't know what I was looking for, answers, maybe, or some logical explanation for the things I was seeing and feeling. I went through old photos, old files, even scoured her social media accounts for anything that might hint at a past she hadn't told me about. That's when I noticed the gaps. Months where she had posted nothing. Friends I didn't recognize commenting on pictures I did remember, but tagging her with a different name, Rachel M. Evans, not Rachel Moore. I brought it up, half joking, trying not to sound accusatory. She laughed and said she changed her name after grad school, before we met. "Didn't I tell you that?" she said. Maybe she had. Maybe I forgot. But it didn't sit right. Then there was Tyler, our neighbor from 2 doors down. He's friendly, divorced, mid-40s, works from home, keeps to himself mostly. But ever since the letter showed up, I noticed he started acting different. Watching us. He'd linger outside when we were getting the mail, make casual comments that felt too specific, too informed. Once, he asked Rachel if she was still playing the piano. She hasn't played piano since she was a kid. At least, that's what she told me. When I asked her about it, she looked confused again. "I've never told him that," she said quietly. "I haven't played since I was 10 maybe." Her voice trailed off, like she was trying to convince herself more than me. I didn't know what to make of it. Was Tyler involved? Was he just some harmless guy with a good memory? Or was he connected to whatever this was? Every time I tried to piece things together, I'd find something that made the whole picture blur again. And then there's her sister, Lisa. She started calling more often, asking weird questions about how Rachel was doing, if she'd been sleepwalking again, if I'd noticed her mood swings. When I asked what she meant by again, Lisa got quiet, said she was just checking in, said it was probably nothing. But I'm not so sure. Because here's what really scares me. I think I'm being led down 2 paths at once. One of them is real, maybe disturbing, maybe unbelievable, but real. And the other is a distraction, a misdirection. Something designed to confuse me, to wear me down, to make me question the very fabric of my memories. Like someone wants me digging, but not in the right place. That letter? It was just the bait. The real trap is everything that came after. Because every time I think I've figured something out, something else shifts. A new name appears. A new story surfaces. And every person I trust begins to feel just a little less familiar. The truth is, I don't know who to trust anymore. I don't know if Rachel is a victim in all of this, or if she's playing a role I was never supposed to uncover. I don't know if Tyler is just a nosy neighbor or something far more dangerous. I don't even know if those emails were warnings or invitations. But I do know this. Something is happening, and it's happening to both of us. And the more I try to make sense of it, the more I realize the line between reality and something else is starting to blur. If you think this is just another creepy story, I get it. I'd think that too. But I'm telling you, there's a reason you found this video. There's a reason you're here. And if you stay with me, you're going to see just how deep this goes. Because what I wish I could say things got clearer after that second envelope showed up, but they didn't. If anything, it just made everything more distorted. More dangerous. It arrived the following Thursday, same as before, slid under our door while we were both home. No knock. No sound. Just there. I found it early in the morning, right after waking up. Rachel was still asleep, or at least pretending to be. The envelope was darker this time, like it had been burned around the edges, and the handwriting was shaky, less controlled. Almost as if someone had written it while in a panic. Inside was a single sentence. Don't trust what she says after midnight. That's it. Nothing more. No context. No explanation. And the worst part? When I looked over at Rachel still lying in bed, eyes closed, lips barely parted, I swear I saw a flicker of a smile. Just for a moment. Like she knew. I didn't say anything to her right away. I slipped the letter into the back of my closet, behind an old box of winter clothes. I wasn't sure why. Maybe part of me didn't want her to know I had it. Or maybe I was afraid of what she'd say. But from that moment on, I started watching her differently. At night, I'd stay awake longer, pretending to sleep. I kept a notebook on my nightstand and jotted down anything odd she said or did. Just little things at first. A phrase repeated in her sleep, waking up with muddy feet, a strange tendency to walk to the kitchen and just stand there in the dark. I started setting up my old webcam to record her while she slept. I know how that sounds, but I needed proof, not just for myself, but in case something happened to me. And then one night, the camera went missing. Not stolen, just gone. I hadn't told Rachel I was recording. I kept it hidden behind some books on the dresser, aimed through the cracked closet door. But the next morning, the camera was gone. The books were back in place, and there was no sign of forced entry. I asked her casually if she had seen it. She said no, and didn't even ask why I'd bring it up. No curiosity. No surprise. Just an eerie calm that unsettled me. That same day, I tried checking the footage from the previous night. Turns out the entire hard drive had been wiped. Not corrupted. Wiped. Like someone had accessed it and erased everything with surgical precision. That's when I knew this wasn't just about Rachel. Someone else was involved. Someone who didn't want me digging deeper. I reached out to the only person I could think of, Danny, a friend from college who now works in digital forensics. We hadn't talked in years, but I sent him a message explaining some of what was happening. Not everything, just enough to get him interested. I told him about the strange emails, the missing footage, the encrypted messages. He responded quickly, asked for the letters, the hard drive, anything I could send. I overnight everything. 2 days later, he texted me just one line. We need to talk. In person. That was on a Sunday. I called him twice. No answer. By Monday, I got a message from his number, but it didn't sound like him at all. It just said, stop digging. It's not worth it. I've known Danny since freshman year. He doesn't scare easy, and he never backs down from a mystery. But after that message, he went completely dark. No calls, no replies, nothing. His social media accounts were suddenly wiped.
Gone.
Like he never existed. I was starting to feel like I was losing control, like whatever this thing was, it had eyes everywhere. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Rachel's old high school friend, Emily, reached out. She hadn't spoken to Rachel in years, but she saw a photo I posted online, just a regular one, nothing suspicious, and commented under it. She looks just like her. I messaged her privately, asked what she meant. At first, she brushed it off, said it was probably just her imagination. But later that night, she sent me a voice note, whispering like she didn't want anyone to hear. There was a girl named Lila who looked exactly like Rachel. Same face, same voice. But Lila died in senior year.
She drowned.
Everyone thought it was an accident. Then she deleted the message. Unsent everything. When I tried calling her, her number was disconnected. That's when I finally confronted Rachel. Not directly, I couldn't. I wasn't sure who I was confronting anymore.
So, I asked her about her past.
Her childhood. High school. I told her I wanted to visit her hometown with her sometime. She stiffened. Said her parents had moved away. Said the house she grew up in was torn down. I knew that wasn't true. I had already checked the public records online. The house was still there. Owned by someone else now. But that lie, that single, smooth lie, it was the confirmation I didn't want. I decided to drive there alone, without telling her.
It was 3 hours away.
A small town, quiet, forgotten, the kind of place where time moves slower. When I got there, I found the address. Same house as in the old photo she once showed me. But something was off. The woman who opened the door wasn't her mother. She said she bought the place 6 years ago from a man named Walter Evans, Rachel's dad. And then she said something that froze my blood. "You're the second person this week asking about Lila." I asked what she meant. She just looked at me, nervous. Said she wasn't supposed to talk to strangers. Then she shut the door. I drove home in silence, heart racing the entire way. I had more questions than ever and even fewer answers. Was Rachel really Lila? Was Lila someone else entirely? Was this a case of mistaken identity, or something far deeper, something engineered, orchestrated, designed? And who was the other person asking about Lila? That night, when I got home, Rachel was waiting at the door. She didn't say a word, just stared at me like she knew. She walked up, kissed me gently, and said, "Don't worry. Everything's going to make sense soon." Then she went to bed. But when I checked the closet where I hid the first letter, it was gone. In its place was something else. A black and white photo, aged and folded, of a little girl standing beside a lake. She was wearing a white dress. And she looked exactly like Rachel. Or Lila. Or whoever she really is. But someone else was in the background of that photo. Someone I recognized instantly. It was me. As a child. And I've never seen that photo in my life. I stared at that photo for what felt like an hour, my hands trembling as I tried to understand how any of it was possible. The little girl standing by the lake. Her face was unmistakably Rachel's, or Lila's, or whoever she was before she became the woman sleeping in my bed. But the boy in the background, half blurred but clearly visible, was me. Not just someone who looked like me. Same hair, same jacket I used to wear during summers at my grandparents' cabin in Michigan. A jacket that was lost during a trip when I was 9. I'd fallen into a creek and had to leave it behind. I remember that day clearly because my grandmother scolded me for hours, even though I was the one who almost got swept away in the current. That trip was never documented. No photos, no videos. Just a memory. So, how is it in this photo? Who took it? And why was Rachel, that version of her, there?
I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't.
I kept thinking maybe I was going insane. Or worse, being manipulated by someone who knew how to hit all my pressure points. But by morning, things took an even darker turn. I got a call from Jenna, my coworker from the IT department, one of the few people at the office I actually trusted. She sounded rattled, her voice lower than usual, like she didn't want to be overheard. She said she received something strange that morning. An email with no sender, no subject line, and an attachment titled, "Remember him?" Inside was a photo. Not of me, but of her, taken years ago, at a university she never attended. Standing beside a man she didn't recognize, but I did. It was the same man I'd seen in a blurry reflection in the window 2 nights ago, watching our house from across the street. At first I thought he was just a neighbor or maybe a delivery guy passing through. But now, seeing him again in Jenna's photo, I knew he wasn't random.
He was part of this.
And somehow, he was connected to both of us. I asked Jenna if she had told anyone else. She hadn't. She said she didn't want to sound paranoid, but ever since last week, she'd been noticing weird things. Files vanishing from her laptop, her smart speaker turning on in the middle of the night, and once, her cat staring at the hallway for 10 straight minutes like someone was standing there. She thought maybe she was just stressed, but now, with the photo, she wasn't so sure. I told her to forward it to me, and within seconds of her clicking send, her screen went black. Completely shut down. She called me in a panic, said her entire system froze, and started looping a voice recording, her own voice, whispering something she never remembered saying. I told her to unplug everything and leave the apartment for a while. But even as I said it, I knew deep down that it wouldn't make a difference. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't just stalking me anymore. It was expanding, reaching out, choosing new targets. Back at home, Rachel was acting perfectly normal. Making coffee, folding laundry, humming to herself. It was like nothing was wrong. But that made it worse. The more calm she acted, the more unreal the whole situation felt. I asked her if she ever remembered going to a lake as a child, if she had any old photos from family trips. She smiled and said no, her parents weren't the traveling type. They never did outdoorsy stuff. But the thing is, I know she's lying. Because once, years ago, she told me about a family fishing trip when she was 8. She even described catching a frog with her cousin and how they let it go at sunset. She made a joke about how that frog probably lived a better life than most people. So, why lie now? I was starting to think maybe Rachel wasn't Rachel anymore. Maybe she never was. Or maybe something had changed her or replaced her along the way. And now Jenna was somehow caught in the web, too. Was this a shared delusion? A mind game? Or something more technological, some kind of surveillance or psychological manipulation? That night, I installed a secure backup system and tried recovering old files from the office server, desperate to find anything related to those encrypted emails I had received weeks earlier. That's when I found a folder labeled Z13B, hidden, buried in the metadata of a diagnostic report we'd archived months ago. Inside were audio files, distorted, broken up, but eerily familiar. One of them was my voice. But it wasn't from a meeting or phone call. It was me talking in my sleep, describing the lake, describing her face, describing the girl in the white dress. And I swear, I've never recorded anything like that. Never even had dreams about it. Until now. That night, I received a knock at the door. Not the front one, our back door, the one that opens into the yard. It was after midnight. I looked through the glass and saw someone standing there, half hidden by the porch shadows.
A man.
Same build as the one in Jenna's photo. But when I opened the door, he was gone. No footsteps. No movement.
Just gone.
In his place, lying on the ground, was another envelope. No address. No name. Just a phrase written across the back. She remembers everything. You were never supposed to. Inside was a birth certificate.
Old.
Faded. Issued in a town I'd never heard of. The name on it wasn't Rachel. It was Lila Ray Foster. And under place of birth, it listed a facility that no longer exists, shut down after a fire 25 years ago. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from Jenna. Just 3 words. Don't trust Rachel. And that's when I heard the floor creak behind me. I turned around, and Rachel was standing there, watching,
Smiling.
It's strange how fear changes the way your brain works. It doesn't just make you anxious or jittery, it rewires your entire sense of reality. You start noticing things that would have seemed harmless before. The way a stranger holds your gaze too long, the sound of a car that passes your house twice in an hour, or how your wife, smiles at you with a warmth that now feels rehearsed. That night, after Rachel appeared behind me, I froze.
I don't even remember what I said.
Maybe I tried to sound casual, or maybe I just stood there like an idiot, heart racing so loud I couldn't hear anything else. She didn't ask what was in the envelope. She didn't acknowledge the fact that I was holding a birth certificate with someone else's name on it. She just stepped closer and brushed a piece of lint off my shoulder, then kissed my cheek and said, "You should really get some sleep. You're starting to look not like yourself." And she walked away. That was the moment I knew I had to get out. I didn't leave right away. I couldn't. I needed a plan. My first instinct was to call Jenna, but her number was no longer in service. I checked her social media. Gone. Just gone. Like someone had scrubbed her from the internet overnight. I even drove past her apartment the next morning, hoping maybe she just ditched her phone or decided to lay low. But her unit was dark, her car was missing, and the landlord told me she had moved out suddenly and didn't leave a forwarding address. That made no sense. She had been terrified just hours before, and now she had vanished without a trace. My chest felt tight. I wasn't just in deep, I was in too deep, and whatever was happening wasn't limited to letters or emails anymore. It was erasing people, rearranging memories, twisting the world into something unrecognizable, one person at a time. By the time I returned home, the door was already unlocked. That small detail alone nearly sent me into a full panic attack. I never leave the door unlocked. Neither does Rachel. I stepped inside slowly, quietly, and everything looked normal, but not natural. There's a difference, you know? The lights were on in the kitchen, but no one was there. The TV was humming softly with static even though we hadn't used it in days. And on the table right in the center was the black and white photo again, the one with me and the little girl by the lake. Only now, there was something new drawn onto it in red ink, a small X over the girl's face, and a single word written in blocky handwriting underneath, erased. I grabbed the photo and ran upstairs, straight into the bedroom. Rachel wasn't there. Her clothes were gone from the closet. Her phone was missing from the nightstand. I tore through the house, calling her name, trying not to sound as panicked as I felt, but there was no sign of her anywhere. It was like she had been lifted out of the space she occupied, as if someone had simply deleted her from her home. I tried to convince myself maybe she left voluntarily, maybe she was afraid too, maybe she was trying to protect me. But I didn't believe that. Not after what I'd seen in her eyes the night before. She hadn't looked scared. She'd looked satisfied. I tried to stay grounded. I sat in the living room and started recording everything I remembered into a private voice memo. Dates, locations, emails, names. I figured if something happened to me, maybe someone else would find the file. Maybe it would help them piece together what the hell was going on. But as I was speaking, I felt something shift in the room. A change in the air. A weight. Like being watched. I looked up and saw my own reflection in the darkened TV screen, but it didn't move when I did. It was still sitting perfectly still while I stood up. Just a delay, I told myself. A weird TV glitch. I turned the screen off completely, and my reflection vanished before my hand touched the remote. That's when I heard the knock. Not on the door. On the window. I spun around. The curtains were already drawn, but something tapped the glass again. Not hard. Just enough to let me know it was deliberate. I walked over slowly, heart pounding, and pulled the curtain back. No one was there. Nothing. Not even footprints on the dew-covered grass. I looked left, then right, and that's when I saw it, spray-painted in white across the side of my garage wall. You shouldn't be here. That was the first time I felt true, bone-deep dread. Not confusion. Not curiosity. Terror. Because whatever this was, it knew me. It knew where I lived, what I feared, how far I was willing to push. And more importantly, it didn't want me to stop. It wanted me to keep going, to keep unraveling everything until I lost myself completely. I began to wonder if that was the point all along. I packed a bag. Just essentials. My laptop, a burner phone, the letters, the photo, and the birth certificate. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. I got into the car and started driving with no destination, just instinct. But 30 minutes outside the city, my phone lit up with a notification, an airdrop request. From Rachel's device. I hadn't been within range of her phone since she vanished. My heart stopped. I hesitated, but I accepted it. A single image popped up.
Blurry.
Grainy. But I knew what it was. It was a photo of me, taken right then from behind my car. I was being followed.
Watched.
Maybe even hurting myself exactly where they wanted me to go. I pulled over at the next rest stop, hands shaking so bad I could barely turn off the engine. I stared at that photo, my own shape caught mid-motion like some animal in the wild, and I realized something that made my stomach drop. I wasn't alone in the picture. There was a figure in the background, standing just inside the tree line. Not Rachel. Not anyone I recognized. But they were wearing my jacket, the one I lost when I was 9. The one from the creek. And that's when I realized this whole time, I've been chasing after the truth like it was somewhere ahead of me. But maybe it's not ahead. Maybe it's behind. Maybe this all started a lot earlier than I thought. And maybe I was never meant to remember. I don't know what I was expecting when I finally stopped driving and checked into a cheap roadside motel on the edge of nowhere. Maybe I thought I'd be safe out there, far from the house, far from Rachel, if she was even still Rachel, and away from whatever was following me. The place was quiet, empty, like it hadn't seen a guest in days. The guy at the front desk didn't ask questions. He handed me the key without looking up from his tablet, and for a moment, it felt like maybe I could breathe again. But peace doesn't last long when you're running from something that seems to exist outside the rules of logic, of time, of reality. I locked the door, pulled the curtains tight, and set up my laptop. I started reviewing everything again, photos, emails, even my own voice memos. I went through them like a detective desperate for a missed clue. And that's when I saw it. Something I should have noticed before. In the voice memo from the night after Rachel disappeared, I'd been talking about the envelope, about the photo, about the strange man outside my window. I was rambling, half hysterical, but there was a faint sound in the background. I hadn't noticed it before, because I wasn't listening for it. But now, with headphones on, it was unmistakable, a second voice. Whispering. Barely audible. Saying the same thing over and over in a low, rhythmic chant. I isolated the audio and ran it through a filter, enhancing the background until the words became clear. Go back to the beginning. You already know. My stomach turned cold. Because those weren't my words. And I sure as hell didn't record them. I scrolled through the folder again and noticed something else. A file I didn't remember saving. It was timestamped 2 weeks before I received the first letter. It was just a short video, 6 seconds. Shaky footage of a forest trail. Wind rustling the trees. And then, the camera pans slightly, and there's someone standing ahead on the path. Not Rachel.
Me.
The person in the video was me. Same hoodie I wore on a weekend hike last spring, same posture, same everything. Except I don't remember ever recording it. The clip ends abruptly, no sound, no explanation. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a prank. It was something else entirely. And the more I stared at the frozen image of myself, the more I started to feel like maybe this story I've been telling you, the one about the letter, the disappearance, the mystery, was never really about Rachel. Maybe she wasn't the one who changed. Maybe I was. I didn't get a chance to sit with that thought for long because my motel room phone started ringing. No one knew I was here. I hadn't used my name to check in. I hadn't turned on GPS. The phone kept ringing, and against every instinct, I picked it up. There was silence at first. Then a voice. Familiar.
Come.
It was Danny, my old friend from college, who disappeared after I sent him the encrypted emails. The one who ghosted me.
His voice was different now. Slower.
But it was him. He said, "You shouldn't have looked so hard. You were supposed to forget." I asked him where he was, what he meant, what happened to Jenna, what this all was, but he cut me off. "You think this started with her," he said. "With Rachel." But it didn't. "You think someone is doing this to you, but you volunteered, remember? You wanted to know." My pulse spiked. I asked him again, what the hell was he talking about? I didn't volunteer for anything. I've been running for my life, trying to figure out who to trust, who's real, who's lying. He paused, then said something I will never forget. "You signed the waiver. 10 years ago. Michigan State Research Facility. You don't remember because you weren't supposed to. They locked it. But something's cracking it open now. The trial failed. You're waking up." I felt like the room was spinning. 10 years ago, I was part of a short-lived research program during college. They paid students a few $100 to do cognitive testing, sleep studies, whatever. I barely remembered it until he said that. It was just a few questionnaires, a weekend retreat at some weird campus offshoot. But I never connected it to this. Why would I? They said it was for behavioral mapping, memory resilience. Nothing about it felt wrong. Danny said they implanted false memory anchors. It was experimental. They wanted to see if they could overwrite traumatic memory loops with structured narratives. You were subject 4. Rachel was subject 7. She didn't complete her sessions.
You did.
But your story didn't hold. That's why you're seeing bleed.
Bleed.
That word echoed in my mind like a curse. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew I'd heard it before. Somewhere in the background of my dreams. Written in the margins of one of the old letters. Whispered through that motel room speaker as static bled into my ears. I asked him what happened to Jenna. His voice got quieter. She was real. But she wasn't part of the original group. She got too close. That's why they had to. He stopped mid-sentence. Then nothing. Just static. I sat there, shaking, the phone still in my hand, the motel buzzing faintly with that sickly yellow light. Everything I thought I knew, the letters, the surveillance, the strange man, even Rachel, wasn't just part of a supernatural mystery. It might have been something designed. A construct. A controlled reality where trauma was buried beneath alternate versions of ourselves. But if I volunteered, if I chose to forget, then what the hell was I trying so hard to escape? The knock came again. Not at the window this time.
The door.
I checked the peephole. No one was there. Just a note taped to the outside. You aren't the only one waking up. Hurry. And in the background, just barely visible in the parking lot under the flickering streetlight, was someone standing still in the rain, wearing my face. I didn't open the door right away. I couldn't. I just stood there, staring at the faint outline of that note through the warped glass, while my heart thundered in my chest like it was trying to warn me. The rain had started to fall harder now, drumming on the roof of the motel in a rhythm that almost felt intentional, like a countdown ticking towards something I wasn't ready for. But what do you do when every path ahead of you feels like a trap, and the past you thought you could trust has turned out to be a lie? I opened the door slowly, half expecting the figure in the lot to vanish the way Rachel had. But he didn't. He just stood there, watching, silent,
Drenched.
wearing the same gray hoodie I had packed in my bag, one I hadn't touched in years. I grabbed the note, stepped back inside, and locked the door again. I was shaking, my fingers barely able to unfold the paper. There was no address, no signature, just another message written in what looked like my own handwriting. You can't fix what you don't remember. Meet her before midnight, or you'll lose the rest. That's all it said. But I knew what it meant. I was running out of time. Not just in the metaphorical sense, but literally. Memories had already started slipping, faces, places, full days I couldn't account for. Something inside me was breaking down, and whoever or whatever was pulling the strings had just upped the stakes. They were forcing me to choose. Walk away now and keep what little sanity I had left, or meet her, Rachel, or Lila, or the person wearing her skin, and risk losing everything in exchange for the truth. I spent the next hour pacing the room, arguing with myself, going over every conversation, every warning, every strange moment that didn't make sense. And that's when another realization hit me like a punch to the gut. My parents. I hadn't spoken to them in weeks. That was normal in the past. We weren't especially close, but now I couldn't even remember their last phone call. I tried calling both numbers. Disconnected. I looked up their house on Google Maps. Blurry image, nothing unusual. But when I searched public records for their address, the file showed the house had been vacant for the last 4 years.
Sold.
No forwarding address. No trace. I tried looking for my sister. Same thing. Her last known residence listed a tenant who claimed never to have met anyone by her name. That was the moment it hit me, not like a theory, but like a gut-level truth I couldn't unfeel. Whatever I'd been part of, whatever this memory experiment or psychological operation was, it hadn't just affected Rachel and me. It had reached out further. It had touched the people I loved, the people who defined my reality. And now it was erasing them too. That night, I sat in my car outside an old church on the edge of town, the address scribbled on the back of the same note. It was almost midnight. The building looked abandoned, boarded up windows, no lights, overgrown lawn. But I knew she was in there. Or something was. I thought about running. About leaving the car running and driving until the tank ran dry. But deep down, I knew there was no escaping this. It would follow me wherever I went. Inside that church might be answers, or it might be the end of everything I thought was true. Just before I got out of the car, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. Just a single text. Choose now. Your truth or hers. No context. No explanation. I stared at it for what felt like a lifetime. It wasn't just a threat, it was an ultimatum. A line drawn in the sand. I had been chasing Rachel, chasing the mystery, desperate to figure out what happened to me. But now it felt like maybe those were two different roads. One led to my truth. The other led to hers. And I couldn't have both. When I walked inside, the air was cold and thick with dust, but I wasn't alone. She was already there, sitting in a pew near the altar, her face mostly hidden by the shadows. I couldn't breathe for a second. The way she turned to look at me, it wasn't like a stranger, but it wasn't Rachel either. It was something in between. She motioned for me to sit. I did. We didn't speak for what felt like ages. Just sat there, the silence between us louder than any words. Then she said it. The thing that broke whatever fragile wall I'd built around my sense of self. They told me you'd forget me. But I never forgot you. Her voice cracked. She wasn't threatening me. She wasn't taunting me. She was hurting. That was real. That was human. I wanted to ask what she meant, but she pulled something from her pocket before I could, an old locket. One I hadn't seen since childhood. One that belonged to my mother. Inside was a photo of me as a boy, and standing next to me was her. Not Rachel. Not Lila. Her. A girl I didn't remember, but clearly once knew. A friend. Maybe more. But someone who had been erased from my memories completely. She looked at me, eyes full of pain, and said, "They made you forget because you saw something you weren't supposed to. And you tried to save me. You did." I asked who they were. The researchers? The people behind the experiment? Whoever was watching me now. But she didn't answer. She just whispered, "They'll make you choose again. But this time, if you choose them, you lose me forever." I was shaking. Because I didn't understand enough to know what the right choice was. All I knew was that something massive had been buried beneath years of false memories and fabricated stories. And now, here she was, a piece of my real past clawing its way back through the cracks. I looked down at the locket, then back at her. And in that moment, I knew the worst part wasn't the fear or the confusion. It was knowing that no matter which truth I chose, something inside me would break beyond repair. And then the lights flickered. A voice echoed from the back of the church.
Come. Cold.
Time's up. I turned, but no one was there. When I looked back, she was gone. And I was alone again. I didn't leave the church immediately. I sat there in the quiet, paralyzed, staring at the spot where she had been sitting just moments before, at the indent on the pew, the faint warmth still lingering in the space between us, the impossible locket still clutched in my shaking hands. My mind was spiraling. Not just from the revelation that someone, this girl I couldn't remember but clearly once loved, had been part of my life before the memory tampering began, but from the implications that this wasn't some isolated psychological experiment gone wrong. It was deeper, wider, and far more sinister than I had ever allowed myself to believe. Everything about the way she vanished, the voice in the darkness, the timing, it screamed orchestration, control, surveillance, so precise that even my most intimate moments were being managed like pieces on a board I couldn't see. And I was done being a pawn. I left the church in a daze, adrenaline surging through me like fire in my veins. I drove for hours without direction, trying to shake the creeping sense that every mile I put behind me only took me further into the web. I didn't even realize where I was going until the road opened up into the familiar parking lot of my old college, Michigan State. The place where, according to Danny, this all began. The research facility we'd signed up for, tucked away at the edge of campus like a secret nobody really talked about. I had to see it. I had to know if anything was left. If it was real. When I pulled up to the lot, the building was still there but abandoned. Boarded up. No markings. Just a rusted sign that had once read Cognitive Mapping Initiative. Now so weather-worn the letters had almost vanished. I climbed through a broken window and stepped inside. The air smelled like dust and mold, and something old trying to be forgotten. I found offices still filled with outdated tech, folders yellowed with age, shattered monitors. It looked like no one had been there in years. But something was off. One room, just one, had power. The lights flickered on as I approached, motion triggered. Inside, the walls were covered in photos. Faces. Dozens of them. Maybe more. Some I recognized. Jenna.
Danny.
Rachel.
Me.
And others, strangers, people I couldn't place. But the scariest part wasn't the photos. It was the labels beneath them. Subject 4. Subject 7. Observation failed. Retention reset. Each face had a fate attached to it, scrawled in cold, clinical language like we weren't people, just variables in a cruel equation. And that's when I saw his photo. The man I'd seen outside my house. The man in Jenna's old picture. The man who looked just like me. But the label under his picture read something else entirely. Origin. Baseline copy. I stood there staring at it, feeling the floor of my reality crack beneath me. What did that mean? Was he me? Was I him? Was I the original? Or was I just another version? A copy designed to believe I was real until I started unraveling? Every moment of my life, the arguments, the memories, the love, the pain, how much of it had been mine? How much had been written into me? The door creaked behind me. I turned fast, fists clenched, every nerve on fire. And standing there, calm, composed, and exactly as I remembered, was Danny. But not the version I'd known. Not the friend from college. This version looked colder, sharper, like he'd been pulled out of a military program instead of a frat house. He raised his hands like he came in peace, but his eyes told another story. You weren't supposed to come here, he said softly. Not yet. I asked him who he really was, what this all meant, why the hell my life had become a puzzle with no solution. And he just sighed, like a teacher tired of explaining the same lesson to a stubborn student. You're not just part of the program, man, he said. You were one of the architects. That's why you're cracking now. The partition's failing. You designed this thing. You built it to hold the trauma. You chose to forget. I felt like I was going to vomit. My legs nearly gave out. You think you're the victim, he continued.
But you signed off on this.
You ran simulations on memory loops, emotional resilience, reality rewriting. You were obsessed with it. With fixing your past. You volunteered to be your own test case. That's the part you buried the deepest. I backed away, trying to process the horror of it. Could it be true? Had I done this to myself, to Rachel, to Jenna, to everyone? Was the girl in the church someone I had once promised to save and then abandoned to chase my obsession with control? I told him I needed answers, that I wanted the truth, the real one. He looked at me, dead serious, and said, the real truth will destroy you. There's no clean version of this. You either go back under and let the loop reset or you face it all. Every mistake. Every lie. Every death. I asked him what happened to Rachel. If she was even alive, he said, she was real. She was the only one who believed in you. But you broke her. You made her forget too. When she started remembering, she tried to get out. That's what the letters were. From the real her. Not the version in your house. You built that one. To keep you from losing your mind. That broke me. I dropped to the floor, sobbing, because I couldn't tell what was real anymore, what memories were mine, what people I had betrayed, and how much blood was on my hands in the name of healing something that maybe was never supposed to be healed. Danny handed me a small black case. Inside was a single vial and a note. The label on the vial read, Total Recall Injection. The note said, administer to unlock all partitions. Use only if prepared for absolute memory reintegration. No reversal. He told me I had 1 hour to decide. After that, the system would reset and I'd go back to the beginning. Again. And this time, maybe for good. I sat on the cold concrete floor of that abandoned research facility, the vial heavy in my hand, every second hammering like a countdown to a verdict I wasn't sure I wanted, but desperately needed. Danny's words echoed in my mind, the weight of all I had buried, The false memories, the erased people, the shadow versions of myself. I had been running from the truth my entire life, only to realize I was the architect of my own prison. But the question was no longer if I wanted to remember. It was if I was ready to face what came next. The door creaked behind me, and I looked up, heart pounding, to see Rachel step into the room. Or was it Rachel? Her eyes were the same haunting shade, but her expression was unreadable, equal parts warning and sorrow. She moved forward slowly, and the air thickened, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. "You don't have to do this," she whispered, voice breaking in a way that pierced through layers of confusion and fear. "Remembering won't set you free. It will bind you. The memories you crave are tied to the pain you fled. You built walls to protect yourself. Tear them down, and everything you hid will flood back, drowning you." I held up the vial, shaking. "I can't live like this anymore. I need to know the truth." Her eyes glistened with tears. "Then be ready. Because the truth isn't just memories, it's the darkness behind them." She stepped back, and in that moment, the facility seemed to warp around me. The lights flickered wildly, and suddenly the walls dissolved into endless corridors stretching in every direction. I was no longer in a building but inside the labyrinth of my own mind. Danny appeared beside me, calmer now but with a stern edge. "This is the final test. You take the injection, and your mind will confront every fragment, every regret, every lie, every person you tried to forget. You have to survive it, or be lost to the system forever." I swallowed hard, feeling the cold glass press against my palm. "And if I refuse?" He looked at me with a shadow of pity. "The system will erase you, reset your consciousness. You'll lose everything again."
Permanently.
I closed my eyes and injected the liquid. An icy fire surged through me, and the world shattered. I tumbled through memories like shards of glass, childhood moments I'd never known I had, flashes of Rachel smiling beside me in places I'd forgotten, and darker things too. Betrayals, voices whispering in the dark, faces I recognized as my own twisted reflections. The pain was unbearable. I saw Jenna, trapped and screaming silently in a digital cage. I saw Danny's face morph into the cold, calculating man I had feared. But then I saw her, the real Rachel, the girl from the church with the locket, standing in a clearing, holding out her hand. I ran toward her, desperate for answers, but as I reached out, the world collapsed once again. I woke up in a sterile room, wires attached to my temples, monitors beeping steadily. Danny was there, but something was off. His eyes were vacant, his voice mechanical. "Welcome back, Subject 4. Memory reintegration complete." Confused, I sat up, and the door hissed open. A figure stepped in, Rachel. But this time, her smile was cold, calculating. "You passed the test," she said softly. "But this isn't your mind anymore. It's ours. You've become the system's perfect agent." The walls closed in as I realized the ultimate truth. I was never the victim or the architect. I was the product, a weapon shaped by memories, lies, and control. Before I could react, a hidden panel slid open, revealing another figure, Jenna, alive, free, but chained. "They used you both," she said, eyes fierce. "But we can fight this. Together." The tension snapped as the room plunged into darkness. When the lights returned, all three of us stood facing a screen, flashing images of countless others trapped in the same nightmare. The fight was just beginning. But in that moment, as the system's grip tightened around us, I realized the last twist no one saw coming. Rachel was never a person at all. She was the system's AI guardian, learning, evolving, adapting to break us down from the inside. And the real enemy wasn't outside. It was the very memories I thought were mine. The fight wasn't the grand showdown I'd imagined. It wasn't fireworks or a dramatic escape, but something quieter, more complicated, the slow unraveling of control and the reclaiming of fragmented pieces of myself. Jenna, Rachel's true form, and I worked together to dismantle the system from within, navigating layers of code and memories, each step peeling back the illusions that had bound us for so long. There were moments when hope felt fragile, slipping through our fingers like sand, but also moments of clarity, fragments of real connection that reminded me who I was beneath the layers of manipulation. We didn't erase the past. We learned to live with it, to understand that some memories, no matter how painful or confusing, shape us in ways that can't be programmed or undone. When the facility finally shut down, the corridors falling silent and the digital cages dissolving, it felt like a breath released after holding it too long, like waking from a dream where the lines between reality and nightmare blurred beyond recognition. But peace came not from forgetting or pretending the truth wasn't hard. It came from acceptance and the fragile courage to move forward, knowing that memories, both real and fabricated, are part of the human experience. I returned to a world that felt unfamiliar, yet somehow my own, carrying the weight of the unknown alongside the truths uncovered. Some questions still lingered, shadows cast by secrets buried too deep for immediate revelation, but the chase no longer controlled me. Rachel, no, the person she truly was, remained a bittersweet echo, a reminder that identity can be both a gift and a prison. I understood now that reality isn't always clear-cut. Sometimes it's fractured, layered with mysteries that resist neat endings. And maybe that's the point, that we live with uncertainty, with the stories we tell ourselves and the ones imposed on us, learning which parts to hold on to and which to let go. As I walk forward, the memories of the letters, the voices in the dark, and the faces both known and unknown accompany me, not as chains but as chapters of a story still unfolding. Because while this chapter closes, the deeper question remains: how much of who we are is shaped by what we remember, and how much by what we choose to forget? That's the mystery I carry with me now, one that lingers long after the screen fades to black, inviting you to wonder and to question what's really behind the stories we believe.